Hello and welcome to the Frontington and Backwoods Railway, for the second part of this mini-series where I'm transforming a Hornby Smokey Joe into a Great Western locomotive. In the previous episode I explained the story behind how the GWR came to own this quirky Scottish saddle tank, and I also installed a cheap DCC chip in it. This time I'm making some significant modifications to the way it looks. The first thing I'm going to do is tidy up the bodywork a little. It'll get a full repaint eventually, but before I can do that I need to clean off the old paint. A bit of a scrub with some isopropyl alcohol made short work of the acrylic paint I had used before to cover over the original white lettering. The red paint on the buffer beams was a little more reluctant to come off, but I got most of it in the end. I think part of the difference here is that the body is made of plastic, while this middle part of the chassis is cast metal. Maybe. Once that was all clean, I went back to the body and attacked the lettering, with a combination of some more isopropyl alcohol and some abrasive paper. A bit drastic, but as I say, it'll be completely repainted anyway, so a nice clean surface is what I want. This model was never designed to be finely detailed, so it's no surprise that it includes some moulded detail rather than the separately fitted parts we're used to today. But given that I'm doing so much else to the model, I figured I might as well scrape off the smoke box handle and the handrail, and I'll replace those with something else. Next on my hit list is the rear end, which includes two lamps in the metal casting. They don't look great, so I'm going to grind them off with my rotary tool. And that didn't seem to make any difference at all. In fact, I think it had more of an impact on the tool. Clearly that's not the right bit for this job. So I switched to a cutting disc. This probably isn't the right tool for the job either, but it worked, so I'm going to declare that it was in fact the right tool for the job. The lamps were shaved flat, and you'd never know they'd been there. At least you won't once it's had a repaint. I also moved some material from the buffer beam. It's completely unnecessary, and not prototypical, so it can go. There are a few things like this on the model, which all stems from the fact that this model was designed to be roughly handled by a 6-year-old in the 1980s. I was merrily hacking away at the front buffer beam when my cutting disc broke. I still have no idea where the rest of it went. For all I know, it's still in orbit somewhere. And that, dear children, is why we wear eye protection. Since I didn't have another cutting disc to hand, I went old school and broke out a big old file. And it worked just fine. More than fine, actually. It totally worked better than my cutting disc. Honestly, I should have just used this from the start. Ah well. Moving back to the chassis, I also want to get rid of these awful massive tension lock couplings and replace them with something a little more subtle. I had these slim couplings in my box of spares, so after carefully figuring out what needed to go and what needed to stay, I took my wire cutters and started hacking away at it. Yes, wire cutters. And once again I'm going to declare that they are the right tool for the job. If you're wondering why the screen has gone black, that's not an artistic decision, or even an editing error. My camera ran out of battery. Sorry about that. You'll just have to imagine what cutting plastic with a wire cutter looks like. I was quite pleased with the result though. It's so much cleaner, and changes the profile of the model quite a lot. And with the body temporarily back on, it's already looking a lot more convincing. Fitting the new couplings meant cutting a few holes and supergluing them in place, making sure I got the height about right. There's no room for an actual NEM socket, nor really any option for any side-to-side movement, so they'll be fixed solidly in place. Hopefully that won't be a problem. Back to the body, I drilled out some holes and poked some florist wire through to make some new handrails. I applied the glue to the inside, as I figured that way I wouldn't have glue marks visible on the outside. Another little detail that this model is missing is lamp irons. Those are the little hooks that the lamps slot into in various positions and combinations, so that the signalman knows what sort of train is approaching. This little shunting loco probably wouldn't have much use for them, let's be honest, but the originals had them, so I'm putting one on mine too. I took a short length of florist wire, flattened it with a hammer, cut it into short lengths, bent them to roughly the right shape, and glued them into place, referencing some photos to make sure they're roughly in the right position. And yes, this was fiddly. I also bought a tiny machined brass kit to make the smokebox dart. It's tiny. So a little hole in the smokebox door, a spot of glue, and that's looking so much better than the moulded plastic one it came with. And the finishing touch for now is the addition of these bits of wire at the back, holding up the back of the cab roof. It's in all of the prototype photos I can find, but I can understand why Hornby would have left it off this model. Although it looks like they considered it at one point because there are handy locating holes in the floor. So that's all the fine detail added. The next and final step will be painting it all in the right colour, but I'll leave that for a separate video, as this one is already quite long enough. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this transformation though. Might even inspire you to do something similar on your own models. After all, if it was cheap to begin with, the risk is relatively low, so it's a good place to start for beginners. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how this is shaping up, so do leave a comment below before you leave. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already to make sure you see my next video too, because still to come is the repaint, and I've also got a new decoder and stay alive capacitor to install. But that's all for this video. Bye for now.